The rain fell hard that night, tapping against the tall glass windows of the Miller Corporation tower. Inside the top floor, the lights were still on even though most of the city had gone dark. David Miller, the CEO, sat alone in his office, his fingers tapping on the wooden desk as he stared at a pile of letters spread before him. These were not business reports, not profit charts, they were complaint letters. Anonymous ones. Some typed, some handwritten, some full of anger, some full of tears. They all said the same thing: our managers treat us like machines. We are scared to speak up. Please, Mr. Miller, see what is really happening down here. David leaned back in his chair, exhaustion clear on his face. He was a man in his 40s, calm and well-spoken, known for his kindness. He had built this company from scratch, believing in honesty, respect, and teamwork. But somewhere along the line, something had gone wrong. The company had grown too big. He had trusted the wrong people. And now, sitting under the cold blue glow of the city lights, he wondered if the empire he had built was slowly rotting from inside. His assistant, Rachel, knocked gently on the door. "Sir, it's almost midnight. You should rest." David nodded but didn't move. His eyes were still on the letters. "Rachel, do you think our people are happy here?" Rachel hesitated. "I think some are, sir. But maybe not all." That answer stayed in David's mind long after Rachel left. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, the reflection of a man who had everything yet felt empty. He wanted the truth. Not what reports said. Not what managers told him. The real truth. That night, an idea began to form in his mind. A crazy, unbelievable idea. Something no CEO had ever done before. He whispered to himself, "If they won't show me the truth, I'll go find it myself." The next morning, David arrived early, before the sun. No suit, no tie, no luxury car. He wore old jeans, a gray shirt, and carried a small duffel bag. Inside it was a set of janitor clothes, gloves, and a name tag that said Sam. He had made a few calls in secret, and one of the cleaning contractors had agreed to hire him for a week. No one else in the company knew. As he stepped into the employee entrance, a wave of nerves hit him. The building looked different from this side. No private elevators, no marble floors, just narrow hallways, flickering lights, and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals. Workers passed by him without even looking. For the first time, David felt invisible. He walked into the janitor's room, a small space filled with mops, buckets, and old cleaning rags. A middle-aged man with kind eyes looked up. "You must be the new guy," he said. "Name's Tom. You can call me Uncle Tom." David smiled. "I'm Sam," he said, using his fake name for the first time. Tom showed him around, explaining the cleaning routes and duties. David listened carefully, taking note of every small detail: how the janitors worked long hours with little pay, how some areas were cleaned twice because management always found faults, and how the workers were scolded if they took a break for too long. Around 9 a.m., office employees started pouring in, well-dressed, loud, full of coffee and complaints about meetings. None of them even glanced at the janitor pushing his mop down the hallway. To them, he was part of the floor, part of the background. David started cleaning near the elevator when he heard voices. He turned slightly. Two managers were laughing near the water cooler. "The boss doesn't care," one said. "As long as the reports look good, he won't question a thing." "Yeah," the other laughed. "We cut the bonus budget again this quarter. Saved the company thousands, he probably thinks we're heroes." David's stomach twisted. Saved the company? Those bonuses were meant for hardworking employees. He looked down, pretending to mop, but his mind was racing. By noon, his hands were sore, his back ached, and he had sweat dripping down his forehead. He wasn't used to this kind of work. Yet, somehow, it felt real. He felt closer to his people than he had in years. During lunch break, he sat in the small cafeteria corner with the cleaning staff. They shared sandwiches and stories. One young woman named Emily sat quietly, staring at her phone. Her eyes were red as if she'd been crying. Tom nudged David. "That's Emily. She's been having a tough time. Her manager gives her a hard time every day. Poor girl barely sleeps." David wanted to ask more, but Emily suddenly stood up and walked out. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and her voice shook. He followed quietly, stopping near the storage room door. Emily's voice echoed faintly. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. He keeps blaming me for mistakes I didn't make. If I lose this job, I don't know how we'll pay rent." Her words hit David like a punch. He felt a lump in his throat. This was his company. The company he built to give people hope. And yet here was one of his own employees crying because of it. He leaned against the wall, trying to control his emotions. He wanted to storm into her manager's office right then, but he couldn't. Not yet. He had to see the full picture. As the day went on, David noticed more things: how the security guard looked tired but was never greeted, how the receptionists were scolded for smiling too much, how employees whispered nervously whenever a senior manager passed by. The atmosphere was thick with fear, not respect. By evening, he was mentally drained. As he changed back into his casual clothes in the janitor's room, Tom looked at him kindly. "Rough first day, huh?" David nodded slowly. "Yeah. I didn't expect it to be like this." Tom laughed softly. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Just keep your head down and do your job. That's how you survive here." Those words stuck in David's mind. That's how you survive here. This wasn't how he wanted people to live in his company. He left the building quietly, his heart heavy. That night, back in his small rented apartment, David couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed. Rachel had sent a message. "Sir, tomorrow's board meeting is at 10. Should I prepare your notes?" He stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "Tell them I'm away this week. Don't tell anyone where I am." He put the phone down and whispered to himself, "If I want to know the truth, I have to live it." The next morning, he was back at work as Sam, the same smell of detergent, the same creaking carts, the same indifferent glances. But today, something felt different. He was no longer just pretending to be a janitor. He was one, part of the silent world beneath the shining offices above. As he mopped the floor near the main lobby, he noticed Mr. Harris, one of the senior managers, shouting at Emily. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're useless, Emily. You think tears will fix your mistakes? Maybe you should look for another job." Emily's hands trembled as she tried to speak, but Harris walked away, shaking his head. The other employees looked away, pretending not to notice. David froze. He wanted to shout, to stop Harris, but he bit his tongue. His plan depended on staying invisible. He had to learn more before acting. When Harris left, Emily dropped her papers, her tears falling on the floor. David walked over quietly, kneeling beside her to help pick them up. "Don't let people like him break you," he said softly, his voice kind but steady. She looked up, surprised. "You're the new janitor, right? Why do you care?" David smiled faintly. "Sometimes, strangers care more than the people who should." Emily gave a weak smile and whispered, "Thank you." Then she walked away, leaving David staring after her, his chest tight with emotion. That night, David sat at his small table, writing down everything he had seen, the unfair treatment, the corruption, the fear. He knew this was only the beginning. He needed proof, evidence strong enough to bring the truth to light. As he closed his notebook, thunder rolled outside, and lightning flashed across the sky. He looked at his reflection in the window, the reflection of a man who was about to uncover something far darker than he ever imagined. He whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll go deeper. No matter what it takes." The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. But inside David's heart, a storm was just beginning. The next morning began quietly. The sky outside was still gray, and the air smelled like rain. David, still dressed as Sam the janitor, entered the building through the side door again. His hands carried the same old mop bucket, but his mind carried something heavier, the memories of what he had seen yesterday. Emily's tears, Harris's shouting, the silence of everyone around them, it all kept echoing in his head. He walked through the empty halls, listening to the sound of his footsteps and the squeak of his cleaning cart. The company was peaceful at this hour, almost too peaceful. Soon, though, the calm would vanish as employees began to arrive, bringing with them the noise, the stress, and the same invisible wall that divided the powerful from the powerless. Tom, the older janitor, was already there. "Morning, Sam," he said with a tired smile. "Morning, Tom," David replied. "You survived your first day." "Not everyone does," Tom said with a small laugh. David chuckled softly. "Yeah, it's different." Tom nodded. "Different is one way to say it. But don't let them break your spirit. You do your job, keep quiet, and stay out of trouble. That's how you last." David thought about that, stay out of trouble. But what if trouble was the only way to bring change? As the day started, David decided to stay near Emily's department. He wanted to know more about what she was facing, and about Harris, the man who seemed to enjoy crushing others. At 9:15, Emily entered the office, her face pale, her eyes tired but determined. She greeted the receptionist politely and sat at her desk. Not long after, Harris appeared, carrying his usual arrogance like a badge. He slammed a file on her desk. "Emily! These reports are a mess again," he barked. Emily flinched. "Sir, I double-checked them." "Don't argue with me," Harris shouted, his voice echoing across the floor. "You're lucky I haven't fired you yet." People nearby looked up but quickly returned to their screens. No one wanted to get involved. David stood near the corner, pretending to mop, his heart beating faster. He could see Emily's hands shaking as she picked up the file. Harris glared at her one last time before walking away, smirking. David took a deep breath and continued cleaning, but his mind was burning. How long has this been happening? How many others have suffered like her? A few minutes later, Emily excused herself and went toward the break room. David followed slowly, pretending to empty trash bins along the way. When he reached the door, he froze. Inside, Emily was on her phone again, her voice trembling. "Mom, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Mr. Harris keeps yelling at me. He blames me for everything that goes wrong. I tried so hard, but nothing is enough." She paused, her voice breaking. "No, I can't quit. I need this job. You know the rent is due, and I already borrowed money from Uncle Jeff. I just don't know what to do anymore." David's throat tightened. He leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. Her pain was real. It wasn't about one bad day, it was about a system that crushed good people quietly. When Emily ended the call, she wiped her eyes and looked at her reflection in the vending machine glass. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Just one more day." Then she walked out, her shoulders heavy but her steps steady. David stood there, frozen. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he whispered to himself, "She's stronger than anyone in that office." But his moment of reflection ended suddenly when he heard footsteps. He quickly grabbed his mop and began cleaning again. Mr. Harris appeared, his sharp eyes scanning the hallway. "What are you doing here?" Harris demanded. David looked up innocently. "Just cleaning, sir." "Don't sir me," Harris said coldly. "Stay away from the staff. You people talk too much. I don't want my employees wasting time chatting with janitors. Understand? David nodded. Yes, sir. Good, Harris said, narrowing his eyes. I'll be watching you. He walked away, leaving behind a trail of arrogance. David clenched his fists but stayed calm. His disguise depended on it. He couldn't risk blowing his cover now. But every word, every insult, every cruel act he saw made his anger grow stronger. By noon, the atmosphere in the office had become tense. Harris was in a bad mood, and everyone felt it. Even Tom noticed. Stay clear of that man today, Tom whispered. He's like a storm waiting to hit. David nodded, but he couldn't ignore Emily. She was still there, quietly working, fixing numbers, typing reports, trying to stay invisible. He admired her strength. But something in her eyes told him she was close to breaking. During lunch, David went to the cafeteria again. He saw Emily sitting alone, eating a small sandwich. Some of the others avoided her, afraid to be seen talking with someone Harris disliked. David walked past her table, pretending to clean. As he wiped the nearby counter, he said softly, "You shouldn't let people like him make you feel small." Emily looked up, surprised. "You again, the janitor." He smiled gently. "Name Sam." She hesitated but finally smiled back. "I'm Emily." "I know," David said quickly, then added, "Tom told me." For the first time, she laughed a little. "Well, Sam, you're brave to talk to me. People usually stay away." "Maybe they're scared of the wrong person," David said quietly. Her eyes softened. "You talk like you've seen this before." David shrugged. "I've seen enough to know that good people don't deserve to be treated badly." Before Emily could reply, Harris entered the cafeteria. His sharp eyes landed directly on her, and then on David. His face twisted with irritation. "Emily," he shouted. "Are you seriously wasting time talking to the janitor during work hours?" The room went silent. Everyone froze. Emily stuttered, I was just..." "Enough!" Harris snapped. "Come to my office. Now." She stood up quickly, tears welling up again. As she walked away, she gave David a tiny shake of her head, silently telling him not to say anything. David lowered his eyes, pretending to scrub the counter. But inside, he was boiling. That man, he's destroying her confidence, her hope. A few minutes later, David heard Harris yelling from his office. The walls weren't thick enough to hide the cruelty. "If you can't handle simple work, I'll find someone who can. Do you want to be unemployed?" David's jaw tightened. He wanted to storm in there and reveal who he really was. But he knew, if he did it now, the truth would never come out completely. He needed to see everything. Later that day, Emily came out of the office, her face pale and tear-stained. She walked past David without looking up. He wanted to stop her, to say something comforting, but Harris's eyes were on him from across the hall. Tom appeared beside him. "Don't get involved, Sam. Harris is dangerous. You'll lose your job if you cross him." David sighed. "Some things are worth losing a job for." Tom looked confused but didn't reply. When the day ended, the building emptied slowly. David stayed behind to finish cleaning. As he pushed his mop near Harris's office, he noticed something. The door was slightly open, and voices came from inside. "We'll handle it like we did last quarter," Harris was saying. "We cut the budget for bonuses and used that money for maintenance. The higher-ups don't check details anyway." A second voice chuckled. "You're smart, Harris. The CEO will never know. He probably thinks we're saving the company." David's heart skipped. They were stealing. Not money from the company's profits, but from the employees' hard-earned rewards. He leaned closer, trying to hear more, when suddenly his mop bucket rolled forward and hit the wall with a loud clang. The voices stopped. "Who's there?" Harris shouted. David panicked. He grabbed the mop and pretended to clean. "Just the janitor, sir." Harris opened the door and glared. "Do you always sneak around doors, janitor?" David forced a smile. "Just doing my job, sir. Floors get dirty fast." Harris studied him for a few seconds, then said coldly, "Be careful where you clean. Some places are off limits." "Yes, sir," David said quietly. Harris closed the door again, but David's heart kept racing. He had almost been caught. But now he knew something real. Corruption wasn't just rumors. It was happening right under his nose. As he walked away, he whispered, "I was right to come here." That night, in his small apartment, David sat with his notebook again. He wrote down everything: Emily's mistreatment, Harris's abuse, and now the theft. The rain started again outside, a soft rhythm against the glass. He closed the notebook slowly and looked at the city lights. His reflection stared back at him, tired, angry, but determined. Tomorrow, he decided, he would dig deeper. He needed proof. And he knew exactly where to find it. But deep down, he also knew, if Harris caught him again, he might not get another chance to walk away. The storm outside grew louder, but David didn't move. The fire inside him burned brighter than the fear. Because now, this wasn't just about saving a company. It was about saving the people who had trusted him. The morning sun peeked through the clouds, but for David, the day felt darker than ever. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had heard the night before, the voices of Mr. Harris and another manager laughing as they planned to steal from the very people who worked so hard every day. His chest burned with anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. If he wanted to fix this, he needed proof. When he arrived at the building, Tom greeted him with a smile. "Morning, Sam. You're early again." David nodded. "Couldn't sleep." Tom chuckled softly. "You'll get used to that. This job teaches you how to live with less sleep and more problems." David smiled faintly but didn't reply. His mind was already busy planning. Today, he would keep a close watch on Harris and the other managers. He wanted to catch them in the act, something real, something undeniable. As the day started, the office slowly filled with workers. Phones rang, printers buzzed, and the same tired faces appeared at their desks. Emily was there too. She didn't smile. Her eyes looked heavy, and David could tell she had cried again last night. Around 10 a.m., David saw Harris walking toward the elevators with two other managers. They were talking quietly, carrying a few thick files. David grabbed his mop and followed at a distance. They entered the conference room on the 4th floor, a place janitors rarely went during work hours. He stopped near the hallway and waited, pretending to mop the floor. He could hear their voices faintly through the door. "Transfer the maintenance funds here," one said. "No one will notice if we adjust the bonus records," another added. "We'll blame the system error if anyone asks," Harris finished. David's jaw tightened. He pulled a small recorder from his pocket, a cheap device he had bought the night before from a nearby store. He turned it on quietly and placed it inside his mop bucket, near the edge of the door. For the next 15 minutes, he kept cleaning slowly, pretending not to care while the recorder captured every word inside that room. His heart pounded in his chest. Every sound, every step, every cough from inside made him nervous. Then suddenly, the door opened. Harris stepped out first, holding his coffee cup. His eyes landed on David. "What are you doing here?" Harris demanded. David froze. "Cleaning, sir. The hallway gets dusty." Harris looked at him suspiciously. "Didn't I tell you yesterday to stay away from this floor?" David forced a polite smile. "Sorry, sir." I was just finishing my rounds. Harris stared for another second, then walked away. Next time, listen to orders, he snapped. David waited until they were gone. Then he quickly picked up the recorder, turned it off, and hid it in his pocket. His hands were trembling, but inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in days: hope. He had the proof. At lunch, he sat quietly in the cafeteria, pretending to eat. Emily joined the table with Tom and a few other staff members. Everyone seemed tense. The rumors about unfair treatment were spreading faster now. "Did you hear?" one cleaner whispered. "Mr. Harris fired another worker this morning. Said she was slow." Tom sighed. "They fire people like it's nothing. It's scary." David stayed silent. He wanted to tell them the truth, that he was the CEO, that he was there to make things right. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to know how deep this problem went. When Emily stood up to leave, David followed her with his eyes. She walked to the window, staring outside. Her reflection looked lost. He walked closer, holding a broom. "Rough day again?" he asked softly. Emily turned and nodded. "He fired my friend, Jenna. She has 2 kids. They didn't even give her a reason." David's heart ached. "That's not fair." "Nothing is fair here," Emily said bitterly. "You work hard, and they still find a way to make you feel useless." David looked down. "Maybe someone will change that one day." She smiled sadly. "Someone like you?" David chuckled lightly. "Maybe." Just then, the cafeteria door slammed open. Harris stood there, looking furious. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on David and Emily. "You again," he shouted, pointing at David. "Didn't I warn you to stay away from the employees?" The entire cafeteria went silent. David's heart raced. "I was just cleaning here, sir." "Don't talk back to me," Harris barked. "You think I don't notice how you wander around, listening to people's conversations?" David swallowed hard. "I'm just doing my job." Harris walked closer, glaring down at him. "If I catch you near this floor again, you're fired. Understand?" David nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." "Good," Harris said, turning toward Emily. "And you, stop talking to janitors during work hours. You're not paid to make friends." Emily's face turned red with embarrassment, but she said nothing. Harris left, slamming the door behind him. The room stayed silent for a few moments until Tom whispered, "That man's a monster." David didn't reply. He looked at Emily, who sat back down, holding back tears. His fists tightened around the broom handle. How many more people has Harris broken like this? That night, David stayed behind after everyone left. He wanted to hear the recording. Sitting alone in the janitor's room, he pressed play. The tiny speaker crackled, and then he heard Harris's voice clearly, talking about shifting funds, lying to upper management, blaming innocent employees. Every word was clear enough to destroy them. David closed his eyes in relief. Finally, he whispered, "Proof." But his relief didn't last long. A noise outside made him freeze, footsteps. He quickly hid the recorder under a pile of rags and opened the door. Harris was standing there. "What are you doing here so late?" Harris asked coldly. David forced a smile. "Just finishing my shift, sir." Harris stepped closer. "Funny. I saw the lights on in this room from the hallway. Most janitors don't stay after hours." David shrugged. "I was just cleaning the equipment." Harris's eyes moved around the room. "You know, Sam, something about you doesn't fit. You talk too confidently for a janitor." David's heart pounded. "I just try to be polite, sir." Harris stared for a long moment, then said, "Maybe I should check your background. Can't have suspicious people here." David stayed calm, though fear crawled up his spine. "Of course, sir. Whatever you need." Harris smirked. "Good answer." He turned and walked away, but his voice echoed as he left, "Remember what I said, I'm watching you." When he was gone, David sat down slowly. His hands were shaking. He had barely escaped being caught. But now, Harris was suspicious. One wrong move, and the truth would come out too soon. He took a deep breath and looked at the recorder. He couldn't keep it in the building anymore, it was too risky. He put it in his pocket and decided to hide it at home. The next day, tension filled the air. Harris seemed even more alert, watching everyone, asking questions, checking ID cards. Emily looked nervous, and even Tom was quieter than usual. At one point, Harris called Emily into his office again. Through the glass wall, David saw her standing stiffly while Harris yelled at her. He couldn't hear the words, but her face said enough: pain, fear, humiliation. When she came out, she walked straight to the restroom. David hesitated for a moment, then followed. He stopped near the door and heard soft sobbing from inside. He wanted to go in, to comfort her, but he couldn't. He wasn't supposed to even be there. So he waited quietly, his eyes filled with guilt. When she finally came out, her eyes were red. She looked at him for a moment and said softly, "You ever feel like no one sees you?" David's heart broke. "Every day," he said. She nodded sadly. "Then you understand." He wanted to tell her, "I see you. I'm your CEO. I'll make this right." But all he said was, "Don't give up yet." That night, David walked out of the building feeling heavier than ever. The rain had started again, soft but cold. He pulled his jacket tighter and whispered to himself, "Enough watching. It's time to act." He decided that tomorrow, he would take the next step, one that could expose the corruption completely. But it would also put him in danger of being caught. As he walked away from the building, lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the glass tower where his company stood, once a symbol of hope, now a cage of fear. And inside that tower, Harris was still awake, staring out his office window, a suspicious look on his face. He picked up his phone and said quietly, "That janitor, something's not right about him. Find out who he really is." David had no idea that his secret was about to start unraveling. The storm outside was growing, and so was the one inside those walls. The next morning, the air inside the building felt heavier than usual. The bright lights of Miller Corporation didn't feel warm anymore, they felt sharp, cold, and watching. Everyone seemed quieter. Conversations were short. Even laughter felt fake. David walked in through the back entrance, just like every other day, but today his steps were slower, more careful. His mind was racing. He knew Harris suspected him. Last night, he had barely escaped being caught with the recorder. Now, one wrong word, one wrong move, and everything would fall apart. He put on his janitor's uniform, pinned the fake name tag Sam to his shirt, and took a deep breath before entering the main hallway. Tom, the older janitor, was already there. "Morning, Sam," Tom greeted, trying to sound cheerful. "You look tired." David smiled weakly. "Couldn't sleep much." Tom nodded knowingly. "Yeah, this place does that to you." They began cleaning side by side, pushing mops across the shiny marble floors. The smell of detergent filled the air. But David wasn't focused on cleaning today, his eyes were scanning the offices, watching every move Harris made. Around 9 a.m., Harris stepped out of the elevator, carrying a cup of coffee and a thick folder. His sharp eyes moved across the hallway until they landed on David. Their gazes met for just 1 second, but it was enough. David felt the chill crawl up his spine. "Morning, sir," David said quietly. Harris didn't reply. He just walked past, but not before giving him a cold, suspicious glance. As soon as Harris disappeared into his office, David whispered to Tom, "Do you ever feel like he's watching everyone?" Tom laughed nervously. "He's always watching. That's what makes him dangerous." David nodded, pretending to agree, but his mind was spinning. He had to find a way to expose Harris soon, before Harris exposed him. Later that day, while cleaning near the accounting department, David saw something strange. Harris and two other managers were moving boxes of files from one cabinet to another. They seemed nervous, whispering and looking around constantly. David quietly pushed his cleaning cart closer, pretending to mop near the door. He could hear parts of their conversation. "Burn these after hours," Harris whispered. "We can't leave any trail." David's heart jumped. Burn these? What were they trying to hide? He moved a little closer, trying to listen better. But just then, one of the managers turned around and frowned. "Hey, what's that janitor doing here?" David froze. Harris looked up. "You again," he said sharply. "Why are you always around this floor, Sam?" David swallowed hard. "Just cleaning, sir. The hallway gets dirty." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Come here." David pushed the cart slowly toward him, his pulse pounding. Harris pointed at the bucket. "What's inside?" "Just supplies," David said calmly. "Let me see," Harris ordered. David's heart raced. The recorder wasn't in the bucket this time, thank God, but there was a small folded note he had used to write some observations. If Harris saw it, everything could be ruined. "Of course, sir," David said politely and handed him the bucket. Harris dug through it, gloves, brushes, detergent bottles. His eyes paused for a moment on the folded paper, but before he could reach it, Tom appeared from around the corner. "Hey, Sam!" Tom called out loudly. "We got a leak in the storage room. Need you right now." Harris frowned, annoyed. "Go fix it," he snapped, throwing the bucket back. David nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." As soon as they turned the corner, David whispered, "Thank you, Tom. You just saved me." Tom chuckled. I saw that look on his face. He was about to eat you alive. David smiled faintly, but inside, his nerves were on fire. Harris wasn't letting go. He was testing him, waiting for a mistake. The rest of the day, David worked silently, keeping his head down. Emily passed by once, carrying a stack of papers. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a small, tired smile. It gave him strength, a reminder of why he was doing this. By late afternoon, Harris called for an unexpected staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the main office area, clerks, assistants, managers, even the cleaning staff. Harris stood at the front, looking proud. "We're starting a new inspection routine," he announced. "Too many outsiders have been wandering in places they shouldn't. From now on, all staff will have background checks. Even the janitors." David's chest tightened. Background checks. He kept his face blank, pretending to listen like everyone else, but his heartbeat thundered in his ears. Harris's eyes moved slowly across the crowd, stopping on him for a split second. David didn't flinch. He just kept his hands folded calmly. When the meeting ended, David rushed to the janitor's room. He closed the door and leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. His secret was slipping through his fingers. He knew what Harris was doing, trying to smoke him out. If they ran his background, they'd find out the truth. Sam wasn't a janitor at all. He was David Miller, the CEO of the company. He had only one option now, to move fast. That night, David stayed late again. The building was quiet, lights dim, computers off. He wore gloves and moved silently through the corridors, carrying his cleaning cart like always. But this time, there was more in the cart, a small USB drive and a hidden camera. He had a plan. He went to the same conference room where he had recorded Harris before. He placed the hidden camera inside a flower pot facing the table and then connected the USB drive to the office computer nearby. He copied every financial file he could find, payment records, bonus sheets, maintenance reports. Each file confirmed what he already knew: Harris and his team were moving money illegally. While the files were copying, David stood near the window, looking out at the city lights. He whispered, "I trusted you, Harris. I gave you everything. And you betrayed not just me, but everyone who works here." A sudden noise behind him made him jump. The door creaked open. "Sam," a voice said. David turned quickly. It was Emily. She looked surprised to see him. "What are you doing here so late?" David smiled softly. "Just cleaning." "At midnight?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled nervously. "Yeah, some messes take longer to clean than others." Emily smiled faintly but looked tired. "I came to collect my things. Mr. Harris fired me today." David's heart dropped. "What? Why?" "He said I talk too much. That I distract people." David's fists clenched. "You don't deserve that." Emily shook her head sadly. "It's okay. I'll find something else." She looked around the empty room, her eyes glistening. "I really believed this company was different." David stepped closer. "It was supposed to be." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Just, don't lose hope yet." Before she could reply, footsteps echoed from the hallway, heavy, quick, angry. Harris's voice boomed, "Who's in there?" David's blood ran cold. Emily froze. "Hide," he whispered urgently. She slipped behind the cabinet while David grabbed his mop. The door burst open, and Harris stepped inside, his eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Cleaning, sir," David replied calmly. "At midnight?" Harris barked. "You think I'm stupid?" He walked closer, glaring at David. "I told you I'd be watching you. So tell me, what are you really doing?" David kept his face blank. "I told you, sir. Just cleaning." Harris's eyes fell on the computer screen behind him, the progress bar still showing file copying, 82%. His face twisted in rage. "What the hell is that?" David's heart stopped. Thinking fast, he knocked over the mop bucket. Soapy water splashed across the floor and onto the computer. The screen flickered and went black. "Oops," David said, pretending to panic. "It slipped." "Idiot!" Harris shouted. "Get out of here!" David grabbed his cart and hurried toward the door. Harris was shouting behind him, furious, but David didn't stop until he reached the hallway. Emily came out from behind the cabinet, shaken but safe. He looked at her and whispered, "Go home, Emily. Don't come back tomorrow." She stared at him, confused. "Why?" "Because everything's about to change," he said quietly. That night, David went home soaked in sweat, but his plan had worked. He had most of the data copied. The truth was now in his hands. But so was danger. Back in the office, Harris stood in the conference room, staring at the wet floor, his jaw tight. He picked up his phone and said in a low, cold voice, "That janitor isn't who he says he is. Find out exactly who Sam really is. Tonight." And for the first time, Harris smiled, a dangerous, knowing smile. The sun rose the next morning, but for David, the world looked darker. He hadn't slept a single minute. Every sound of traffic outside his apartment felt like a warning. Every shadow looked like it was hiding something. He sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the flash drive in his hand, the one filled with proof against Harris and his corrupt managers. His company's name was printed on it, Miller Corporation. It used to fill him with pride. Now, it just made his stomach turn. He whispered to himself, "What have I built?" The company that once stood for hope, honesty, and fairness was now a web of lies. His dream had been poisoned by greed, and he didn't even see it happening. He looked at his reflection in the window. The man staring back wasn't the confident CEO anymore. It was Sam, the janitor, the invisible man. But maybe that's who he needed to be to fix everything. David grabbed his jacket and headed to work early, before anyone else arrived. When he entered the building, the halls were empty. The lights were dim, humming softly above him. The smell of cleaning detergent still lingered from the night before. Everything looked peaceful, but David could feel the storm building underneath. He walked straight to the janitor's room where Tom was sitting with a cup of coffee, reading an old newspaper. "Morning, Sam," Tom said with a smile. "You look like you fought a war last night." David sighed. "Feels like I did." Tom chuckled, then noticed the seriousness in David's eyes. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" David nodded slowly. "Tom, if you found out your boss was stealing from everyone, what would you do?" Tom frowned. "That's a heavy question for this early in the morning." "I'm serious," David said quietly. "Would you tell someone? Even if it meant losing your job?" Tom looked down at his coffee cup. "I've worked here 15 years, Sam. I've seen things that didn't feel right. But people like me don't get to fight the big battles. We just survive." David nodded, feeling a stab of guilt. What if someone could fight it? Someone who had the power to fix it? Tom studied him carefully. "Then I'd tell that person not to wait too long. Bad people don't sleep. They move fast." David smiled faintly. "You're right." He checked his watch. It was 6:30 a.m. Time was running out. Harris was already suspicious. The background check would expose him soon. He had to act before Harris struck first. David left the janitor's room and went to the maintenance area, where he hid the flash drive behind a vent. He couldn't risk carrying it with him. Then he cleaned his cart, took a deep breath, and stepped into the main lobby, ready to face whatever came next. By 9 a.m., the office was buzzing again. People walked fast, whispered quietly, avoided eye contact. The tension was heavy. Emily wasn't there anymore. Her empty desk was a silent reminder of everything wrong with this place. David was cleaning near the glass elevator when Harris entered the lobby. His voice carried power, but something about it sounded off, maybe fear, maybe anger. "Everyone," he said loudly, "we have a small situation. There's been a security breach. Someone has been accessing confidential files. Until we find out who, no one leaves early today." The room went silent. David's heart stopped for a moment. He could feel Harris's eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Understood?" Harris said firmly. Everyone nodded nervously. As Harris walked past David, their shoulders brushed. Harris leaned close and whispered, "Careful where you mop, janitor." Then he smirked and walked away. David's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. Harris was closing in. But David wasn't done yet. He moved to the second floor and began cleaning near the meeting rooms again. He placed his hidden recorder back inside the cart and turned it on. If Harris said anything incriminating, it would be caught. Soon, two managers walked into the nearby conference room, the same ones who were helping Harris. They didn't notice David cleaning outside. "Did you delete the files?" one of them whispered. "Most of them," the other replied. "But there's a problem. Someone made a copy." David's pulse quickened. "They know." "Who?" the first manager asked. "Not sure. Harris thinks it's that janitor." David's hands froze on the mop handle. The first man laughed nervously. A janitor? That's crazy. Maybe. But Harris said he's not who he says he is. David quietly backed away from the door, heart pounding. It was time to leave. But before he could, Tom appeared down the hall. Sam! Tom called out. David turned sharply. Quiet! Tom frowned, walking closer. What's going on? You look pale. David took a deep breath. Tom, listen to me carefully. If anything happens to me, there's a flash drive hidden behind the vent in the maintenance room. Get it to the police. Tom's eyes widened. Sam, what are you talking about? What did you do? David put a hand on his shoulder. Just promise me, okay? Tom nodded slowly. Okay. I promise. Before David could say more, a voice echoed from behind them. Well, well. Look who we have here. It was Harris. He stood with 2 security guards behind him. His smile was cold and poisonous. I was wondering where you'd run off to, Sam. David straightened. Just cleaning. Harris laughed darkly. Always cleaning, aren't you? Funny thing is, you seem to know a lot about things that don't concern you. He took a step closer. Tell me, Sam, where were you last night around midnight? David stayed silent. Harris's smile faded. Answer me. Working, David said quietly. Working, Harris repeated mockingly. Right. Working on stealing company data, maybe? Tom's face turned pale. That's crazy. Sam would never. Quiet. Harris barked, glaring at him. David met Harris's eyes. You're afraid, aren't you? He said softly. Afraid the truth will come out. Harris's face darkened. You have no idea who you're talking to. Actually, David said calmly, I do. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, a silent battle between the liar and the betrayed. Then Harris snapped his fingers. The guards stepped forward. Take him to my office, he ordered. Tom tried to step in, but David shook his head. It's okay. As they dragged him away, Tom's voice echoed down the hallway, trembling, Sam. What's going on? David didn't look back. He knew this was coming. But what Harris didn't know was that the truth was already out of his reach. They pushed David into Harris's office and locked the door. Harris sat behind his desk, staring at him. You know, Harris began, I looked into you. There's no record of any Sam in our system. No background check, no ID, nothing. Who are you really? David stayed silent. Harris leaned forward. Tell me, or I'll make sure you disappear before the end of the day. David looked straight at him. You already destroyed enough people, Harris. Isn't that enough? Harris chuckled. Ah. So you do know me. He stood up, walked around the desk, and leaned close to David. Here's what's going to happen. You'll give me everything you took last night, every file, every copy, or I'll ruin you. David smiled faintly. You already did that. To yourself. Before Harris could respond, the office door opened suddenly. It was Rachel, David's loyal assistant, holding a folder. Harris, she said sharply, we need to talk. Now. Her eyes met David's for a brief moment and widened. She recognized him beneath the disguise. Mr. Miller, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Harris froze. What did you just call him? Rachel covered her mouth, realizing what she'd said. But it was too late. David slowly removed his janitor's cap and glasses, his true face revealed at last. I think it's time we stopped pretending, he said quietly. Harris stepped back, shocked. You're. Yes, David interrupted. David Miller. The man who trusted you. The man you betrayed. Rachel's hands trembled as she whispered, "Sir, we thought you were on vacation." David looked at Harris with steady eyes. "You wanted to know who I am? I'm the one who built this company. And now, I'm the one who's going to save it from people like you." For the first time, Harris looked afraid. He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. "You think anyone will believe you? You have no proof." David smiled faintly. "You sure about that?" He pointed to the small hidden camera on the bookshelf, blinking red. Harris turned pale. "Smile," David said coldly. "You're live." The guards at the door looked at each other in confusion. David turned to Rachel. "Call security headquarters. Tell them to lock down the building. Nobody leaves." Rachel nodded quickly and ran out. Harris tried to make a run for the door, but the guard stepped in front of him, unsure who to obey. "Don't move," David commanded. Harris glared at him, his voice trembling with rage. "You'll regret this." David looked him in the eye. "No, Harris. You will." Outside the office, the building filled with noise, whispers, phones ringing, security alarms beeping. The truth had begun to rise to the surface. David stood by the window, watching the city skyline as the sun began to set. His disguise was gone, his secret revealed, but his mission was far from over. Because Harris wasn't finished yet. And neither was the fight for the soul of Miller Corporation. The office had never felt so heavy. The air itself seemed frozen. Everyone stood in stunned silence as the truth sank in. The janitor who had been sweeping floors for weeks was, in fact, the CEO of the company. David Miller. The name echoed through the halls like thunder. Whispers filled the corridors, spreading from desk to desk, floor to floor. Some people didn't believe it. Others stared at their phones, watching the security feed where the hidden camera in Harris's office had captured every word, every threat, every lie. Inside the office, Harris stood still, pale and sweating. His world had just cracked open. David remained calm, his voice low but steady. "It's over, Harris." Harris gave a short, bitter laugh. "Over? You think one little video will destroy me? You have no idea how deep this goes." David's eyes narrowed. "Then let's see how deep." He reached for the intercom on the desk and spoke clearly. "Attention, all employees. This is David Miller. Yes, I'm the CEO, and yes, I've been here among you as a janitor. Everything that happens in this office from this point forward will be recorded and reviewed. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." A wave of murmurs spread across the building. Some people clapped softly. Others looked terrified. Harris stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're making a mistake, David. You're exposing things you can't control." David met his stare. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." Harris's jaw tightened. "You think you can save this place? You're too late. The board already knows everything, and they're on my side." David's stomach tightened. The board. Of course. Harris had been working with them. That's how he'd stayed protected for so long. But David didn't show fear. Instead, he said, "Then they'll face the truth too." At that moment, Rachel entered the office, breathing heavily. "Sir," she said, "the security team has locked down the building. No one can leave or delete any files." "Good," David said. "Send a company-wide email with the video recording attached. Let everyone see it." Rachel hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" "That's everything." David nodded. "That's exactly why." She quickly left the room. Harris's face twisted in anger. You think people will still respect you after this circus? You humiliated your entire company by pretending to be a janitor. David's eyes flashed. Maybe humiliation is what we all needed to see the truth. Harris's voice rose. You're destroying your own empire. No, David replied quietly, I'm saving it. Suddenly, the phone on Harris's desk started ringing. He glanced at it, frowning, then pressed the speaker button. A cold voice spoke through the line. Harris, what's happening down there? We're seeing your office feed on every monitor. David recognized the voice immediately, Mr. Jensen, the chairman of the board. Harris stammered. Sir, it's not what it looks like. Miller. Miller? Jensen interrupted sharply. He's there? David stepped closer. Yes, Jensen. I'm here. And I've seen what your people have done to my company. The line went silent for a moment. Then Jensen said coldly, You shouldn't have come back, David. Some things are better left buried. David's heart froze. So it's true, he whispered. You're part of this. Harris smirked. Now you see. This isn't about one man stealing money. It's bigger. It's about control. David's anger boiled over. Control built on lies never lasts. He slammed his fist on the desk. The hidden camera blinked again, catching every second. At that moment, the office door burst open. 2 security guards ran in, not Harris's men this time, but company security under Rachel's command. Sir, one of them said to David, we have full control of the building. All files are secured. David nodded. Good. Take Mr. Harris to the main floor. Everyone deserves to hear the truth from his mouth. Harris struggled as they grabbed his arms. You'll regret this, David. You think people will trust a man who lies to his own workers? David looked at him, calm and steady. I didn't lie to them. I walked beside them. Something you've never done. The guards dragged Harris out of the room, his shouts echoing down the hall. David followed behind, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with purpose. When they reached the main floor, dozens of employees were gathered, staring in disbelief. Some had tears in their eyes. Some couldn't stop recording the scene on their phones. David stood at the center of the crowd, looking around slowly. These were his people, the faces he hadn't really seen in years. The people who kept his company alive while corruption spread behind closed doors. He raised his voice. I founded this company to be a place of fairness and respect. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. I lost that. And for that, I'm sorry. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Harris glared at him from where the guards stood holding him. David continued, I came here as a janitor not to spy, but to see. To understand what was really happening. And what I found broke my heart. People like Harris abused their power, and I was too far away to notice. That ends today. Someone from the crowd, a young woman David recognized as one of Emily's friends, called out, What about Emily? Harris fired her for no reason. David nodded firmly. I know. She'll be back tomorrow. And anyone treated unfairly will get justice. Applause began to rise, slowly at first, then stronger. People were crying, clapping, hugging. Harris shouted over the noise, You think this fixes anything? You can't stop the board. You can't stop the system. David turned to him. You're right. I can't stop the system. But I can rebuild it. Harris sneered. And what will you do? Run this place alone? David's voice softened. No. I'll run it with the people who actually care. Harris lunged forward, but the guards held him back. Just then, a sound came from the overhead speakers, the company announcement system. It was Rachel's voice. "Attention all staff," she said clearly. "The internal investigation team and police are on their way. Please remain in your departments." "Thank you." Harris froze. "Police?" David looked at him calmly. "Yes. You stole from me, from this company, from everyone here. And now you'll answer for it." For the first time, Harris looked genuinely afraid. The room went quiet as the sound of sirens echoed faintly outside the building. Blue and red lights flashed through the glass walls. When the police entered moments later, Harris didn't fight. His shoulders slumped as they handcuffed him and led him away. As he passed David, he muttered, "You may have won today. But you'll see, there's more you don't know." David didn't reply. He just watched as Harris disappeared through the doors. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Some employees approached David, shaking his hand, thanking him. Others just stood in quiet awe. Rachel came up beside him, her voice soft. "You did it, sir." David looked at her and shook his head gently. "No, Rachel. We did it." He walked toward the window, staring out at the city below. The rain had started to fall, light, soft, almost cleansing. But deep inside, David knew Harris's last words weren't just empty threats. There was still something out there, something hidden, something darker. And whatever it was, he was ready to face it. He whispered under his breath, "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The rain fell harder that evening, turning the city streets into shimmering rivers of light and reflection. From the window of his office, David watched the water rush past, but his mind wasn't on the storm outside. It was on the storm inside the company, the one Harris had warned him about. Even after Harris's arrest, something felt wrong. Too many things didn't add up. The board, the hidden transfers, the manipulations. Harris had never acted alone. Someone higher up was still controlling the strings, and David could feel their presence like a shadow in the corners of the building. Rachel approached quietly, holding a folder. "Sir, we've reviewed all the files from the recorder and the USB. There's more, hidden accounts, off-the-books investments. Someone else has been siphoning money." David's heart sank. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," Rachel said softly. Harris was just the surface. The deeper network, it's bigger than we thought. David clenched his fists. "Then it's not enough to stop Harris. We need to expose the whole system. Every person involved." Rachel nodded. "I'll help, sir. But we need a plan." David stared out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Tonight, we start. The last stand. We'll finish what Harris started, or we'll fall trying." By 10 p.m., the building was almost empty. Most employees had gone home. The few cleaning staff remaining moved silently, aware of the tension in the air. David, now in his regular CEO suit, walked through the halls with purpose. Every step echoed. Every corner he passed reminded him of the weeks he spent as Sam the janitor, seeing the fear, the suffering, the quiet despair of his employees. He reached Harris's office again. The place was eerily empty now, the lights dimmed. David took a deep breath. He had to access the company's mainframe, the hidden records, encrypted files, secret communications, everything Harris and the board had tried to keep invisible. Rachel appeared behind him, carrying a laptop. "The security system is tight. If we trigger an alarm, the board will be notified immediately." David nodded. "We have to be faster. The longer we wait, the more they can cover their tracks." They slipped into the office, silent as shadows. David connected the laptop to the main terminal. Lines of code flashed across the screen. Hundreds of files. Hidden folders. Transfers disguised as legitimate payments. This is it, Rachel whispered. This proves everything. David didn't speak. His eyes scanned the documents. Each new folder made his blood boil. Fake vendors, offshore accounts, bribes disguised as consulting fees. This was bigger than he imagined. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed from the hallway, a door creaking, footsteps approaching. David froze. Someone's coming, he whispered. Rachel's eyes widened. We need to hide the laptop. He grabbed it and ducked behind Harris's desk while Rachel shut off the terminal. The footsteps grew louder. A shadow appeared in the doorway. It was one of the board members, a tall man with sharp features, wearing a dark coat. His eyes scanned the office and landed on David. Mr. Miller, he said calmly. You shouldn't be here. David stood slowly, holding the laptop like a shield. I think I should. Don't you? The man smirked. So you know. That's dangerous, David. Very dangerous. David's voice hardened. I've already faced danger. I've seen what your greed has done to my people. Now, it ends tonight. The board member's smirk disappeared. He took a step closer. You don't understand. Harris was the warning. He was the test. You passed. But I can't let you destroy everything. Rachel whispered behind him, Sir, he's dangerous. David's eyes met hers. I know. But we don't stop now. The man lunged, trying to grab the laptop. David dodged, using the desk as a barrier. Papers flew everywhere. The board member's face twisted in rage. You think you're clever, don't you? He hissed. Do you know how many people would die to protect this system? David stepped forward, voice steady. I don't care how many. I'm protecting the innocent. And that's more important than anything else. The board member tried to reach the phone to call for help, but Rachel was quicker. She grabbed the receiver and yanked it out. You won't call anyone, she said firmly. The man's eyes widened in fury. You can't stop me. David looked around, searching for leverage. Then he saw it, the hidden camera still in the corner, recording everything. You can't stop the truth, David said calmly. And it's being recorded right now. The board member froze. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. David continued, I trusted people in this company. And I believed in fairness. But you chose greed. Now the world will see everything. The man's face went pale. You'll ruin everything. David shook his head. No. I'm saving everything that matters. Suddenly, the building's alarm system blared. Rachel had triggered it remotely. Red lights flashed across the hallways. Security cameras turned on automatically. Within minutes, uniformed security personnel and police entered the building. The board member realized his game was over. You think you've won, he shouted. David stood tall. No. I know I've won. Because the truth doesn't need permission to exist. Officers quickly restrained the man. The files and laptops were secured. Every secret account, every hidden deal, every betrayal was now evidence. Employees slowly returned to the building, drawn by the alarms. When they saw the CEO standing firm, his face determined, the cameras rolling, and the corrupt board member being escorted out, a wave of relief and hope washed over them. David turned to the employees, voice ringing through the hall. This company belongs to all of you. No one should ever be afraid here again. From today onward, honesty, respect, and fairness will guide every decision. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cried. Others hugged their colleagues. Emily's friends approached Rachel, relieved that justice had finally arrived. David stepped back, letting the employees celebrate. He looked out at the city lights again. The rain had stopped, leaving a calm, sparkling reflection of the skyline. But deep inside, he knew the battle for trust would take time. He had won the first war, exposed Harris and the corrupt board member, but rebuilding hope, loyalty, and fairness in a company this large would take every ounce of patience and courage he had. He whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning. The last stand may be over, but the journey to save what matters has only started." Rachel came beside him. "Sir, the employees are calling for you. They want to hear from their real CEO." David nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then let's make sure they never forget what it means to be seen, to be heard, and to matter." The lights of the office reflected off the polished floors. Outside, the city had been washed clean by the storm. Inside, a storm of courage, justice, and hope had begun, one that no greed, no lies, and no fear could ever stop. And in that moment, David knew, the real fight wasn't against one man or even a few corrupt board members. The real fight was for the soul of every person who had ever believed in hope, and he would never stop fighting. The morning sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across the city. For the first time in weeks, David Miller didn't feel the weight of fear pressing on his chest. The storm outside had passed, and so had the storm inside his company, or at least the worst of it. He walked through the lobby of Miller Corporation, this time without a disguise. The polished floors reflected the sunlight, shining like a promise. Employees, some still shocked from the events of the past night, looked up as he passed. A few whispered among themselves. Others smiled nervously. David paused near the reception. He saw Rachel talking with several employees, handing out forms and explaining the next steps in the investigation. She looked up and smiled warmly at him. "Everything is under control, sir," she said. "People are starting to trust again." David nodded. "Good. That's what matters." He walked down the hall toward the main floor, where employees were gathering. Some had tears in their eyes. Some hugged their coworkers tightly. Everyone had experienced fear, uncertainty, and betrayal, but now, they were beginning to hope again. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the small stage that had been set up for him, the same stage where Harris had once intimidated employees. Silence fell over the crowd as David looked at each face. These were the people who kept his company alive, who had labored faithfully while corruption festered in secret offices. "I know the past weeks have been hard," David began, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "Many of you have suffered because of greed, lies, and fear. Some of you lost your friends, your jobs, or your sense of safety. I know, because I saw it all." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some employees had only just learned that their CEO had been walking among them, unseen, for weeks. "But that changes today," David continued. "The people who betrayed this company have been removed. Harris is gone. The corrupt board member is gone. And from this moment forward, honesty, fairness, and respect will guide every decision in this company." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This company is not mine alone. It belongs to every one of you. And I promise that no one will ever feel invisible here again." A wave of applause broke out. Some employees cried openly. Others hugged, whispered words of relief, and smiled for the first time in weeks. David stepped down from the stage and began walking through the crowd. People stopped him to shake hands, to thank him, to express relief. He approached Emily's desk. She looked up in surprise, her eyes red from crying, but also sparkling with hope. "Emily," David said softly, "you're coming back. No one will ever treat you unfairly here again." She smiled faintly, fighting back tears. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for everything." David nodded, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "No, thank you. You and everyone else gave me the courage to see the truth. I just had to act on it." He walked further through the office, stopping at each department. He spoke to employees individually, listened to their stories, and promised changes. Policies were rewritten. Bonuses corrected. Lost wages returned. People who had been wronged were given apologies and recognition. Outside the office, police and investigators were still finalizing the arrests and collecting evidence. But David didn't watch that. His focus was here, inside, with the people who made the company real. By midday, the company felt alive again. Employees were smiling, laughing quietly, helping each other, sharing their stories. It wasn't perfect, trust had to be rebuilt slowly, but the first stones of hope had been laid. David walked to the rooftop of the building. The city stretched endlessly before him. The sunlight glimmered on the streets, on the buildings, on the people below. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the warmth of a new beginning. He thought of the weeks he had spent as Sam, the janitor. He had seen the fear, the pain, the hidden struggles of the people who kept his company running. And he had learned something important: leadership was not about titles, offices, or money. It was about understanding, compassion, and courage. Rachel joined him on the rooftop. "Sir," she said softly, "what now?" David smiled faintly, looking out over the city. "Now, we rebuild. We make sure no one ever feels invisible here again. And we make this company something everyone can be proud of, not just because of profits, but because of the people who work here." Rachel nodded. "And what about Harris and the board member?" "They'll face justice," David said firmly. "But that's not the real victory." "The real victory is right here," he said, pointing to the office below, where employees were laughing, talking, helping each other. "We've saved the people. We've restored hope. And that's something no one can take away." For the first time in weeks, David allowed himself to smile fully. He had walked among his people as a janitor, seen the truth, felt their pain, and acted. And now, he had restored justice, fairness, and trust. As he stood there, the wind blowing softly against his face, he whispered to himself, "No matter what happens, hope always wins." The building behind him glimmered in the afternoon sun, a symbol of redemption. The employees inside worked together, side by side, rebuilding not just their workplace, but their faith in fairness and leadership. David turned to Rachel. "Let's make sure this never happens again. Policies, checks, transparency, every step. I want everyone to know that this company is safe. That their voices matter. That their work matters." Rachel smiled, inspired. "Sir, I believe you can do it." David looked out once more at the city. "It won't be easy," he said, "but nothing worth saving ever is. And we have each other. That's all we need." Below, employees cheered as David returned to the floor. Their gratitude, hope, and relief radiated through the halls. He shook hands, shared words of encouragement, and promised that every voice would now be heard. For the first time in a long while, the company felt alive, not just in numbers or profits, but in heart, spirit, and trust. And as the sun set over the city skyline, David knew that the storm had passed, the battle was won, and hope, real, enduring hope, had been restored.